This is video podcast for technical leaders and for those who want to become them some days. We have guests who possess extensive experience in the area of technology, and tonight's guest is Paulo Carvalho, CTO, entrepreneur, investor. But before we start our discussion, consider subscribing to our channel. We have lots of great content coming soon, including future installments of CTO Talks. Now, let's talk about our guest, Paulo Carvalho. With over 10 years of experience in multiple domains, he finally landed in the software development, co-founder of multiple companies. And Paulo has a unique, multicultural, and multi-professional perspective, actually, on many aspects of the life. Paulo, it's nice to have you here on our podcast today.
My pleasure.
And two topics that we're going to discuss today, two major topics we're going to discuss today is growing professionals in the software development area, alternative way to grow professionals, and I guess your multicultural view. I mean, I know that you have a lot of experience, and I would love you to share your views, your experience, maybe some insights that you want to share with our audience. Okay, so let's start with growing specialist. I know that you founded a school, but not a standard school that most software company is doing. You have slightly different, some slightly unique. So can you tell us what's so unique about your approach?
Of course. So a quick spiel about my latest enterprise. It's called Avantsoft. It's basically a hybrid between offshoring and hiring software development locally. And the reason why we came up with this is that we're trying to solve the developer shortage. So today, hiring local developers is quite expensive for a lot of companies, which prohibits them from developing their own software. And offshoring, pure offshoring, tends to result in either very low quality software, a lot of difficulties between the management of a company who's hiring and the offshore engineers of actually understanding each other and delivering that which brings value to the company. So when coming up with Avantsoft, we were trying to think, how can we address this specific issue? And our idea, which actually resulted in almost of a school of sorts, as Dimitri pointed out, was to do the following. We know that local engineers that match the cultural traits of the company that are hiring them will often lead to the engineers that will deliver the closest value to what they are requested. They will understand better what is asked from them from managers, because managers are used to working with local engineers. They understand the language, so there isn't much of a language barrier. They're in the same time zone. So there's a lot of advantages to having local engineers. So our idea was, why not pair within our company a very top-level senior engineer that is local to the location of the company who's hiring, with a team of offshore engineers that this local engineer is already used to dealing with. So they already understand this second language. They already know how to work with them. They know the cadence of their work. And by pairing these two, this very senior engineer as a liaison between the company and the offshore engineers, we can do two very interesting things. We can develop software at a lower cost because the offshore cost is lower than the local cost. And two, we are able to use engineers that are still early in their careers in these international communities. And that's where the very interesting aspect lies. Since these engineers, they're working with the senior is explaining to them what to do, the senior is reviewing their code, the senior is ensuring everything is up to standards. These engineers over time, they develop their skills and grow in seniority in a way that is hard to do if they're only assigned to very specific hyper-local tasks that we usually assign to junior engineers when they're joining a company. So we can shorten this span of growing an engineer from their junior levels to their senior levels over, of course, the appropriate span of time, and have them partake in bigger and bigger projects over time. So this is the idea, to create this hybrid approach between offshoring and local to both serve companies while developing talent in communities all around the world. And as almost an ESG twist, because today it's very important for companies to have a purpose, we actually source our engineers these offshore engineers almost exclusively from communities that are not usually very socioeconomically developed. They might be incredible communities, but they're just not seen in these economic hubs. So they tend to be economically poor. And by hiring these engineers from these communities, we can also start developing these communities as we can.
And basically establishing some foundation for future growth in education as well, establishing, I don't know, better school, better universities, and growing your community. So, well, I mean, I slightly disagree with some of your arguments about your school. I mean, not
That's good.
everything. I mean, the mainly is along even with our approach that we're using in our company. But I believe only this purpose, growing your local communities, totally overcome all my disagreement and all my negative, how to say, feedback about your school. So that's actually great. I believe I totally agree with you. Especially nowadays, company should have a purpose, not just make money, not just to do something. It should be something useful. I mean, we do useful work, obviously, for other companies, for developing, I don't know, products and everything else. But we definitely shouldn't forget about local communities, the one who just cannot afford to grow, and bringing them closer to us, especially taking in account our opportunity, our level of opportunities, right?
And Dimitri, the reason why actually I like that you point out that you have a disagreement is that often the best processes, they are created from this adversarial thinking. It's when people that have different points of view get together and actually discuss subjects and try to come up with what is best, that you end up really achieving as something that is optimal. And it is a process that we are still exploring. It is something that is new even to us. We haven't been in the market with this specific service line for very long. And it is something we're experimenting with, something that we're learning from, and we're definitely open to a lot of feedback.
I mean, you know this. You don't make mistakes only if you don't do anything, right? So
Exactly.
and I think that's a way to grow, to make few mistakes, learn on them, and grow on the mistakes. So I mean, my feedbacks are not like significantly negative. I just like some disagreement about some assumptions you put in the beginning. So don't take it hard. I'm all on growing local people, teaching, educating, giving opportunity. Any opportunity I have, I always invest into those activities. Limited, but whatever I can afford. So, and I'm very happy that there are people who actually put more effort than, for example, myself into such activities. So, work is better out there. Good. But Paula, so my I guess one of the concerns that I have about this approach is, well, software developers, they kind of grow from the school. They fool around even in school. I don't doing some small algorithm sorting, some graph, something. Well, depending on the level, depending on the school, and so on and so on. Then they solidify all this knowledge in universities, studying typical algorithms, studying typical approaches. And when they become juniors, not seniors or middle, but juniors, they have opportunity to apply those knowledge templates, approaches they've been learning for 5, 6, 7, sometimes 10 years. And even after these 10 years, many of them, they struggle. So can you tell me how you are planning to overcome such big, I don't know, chunk of educational process?
No, of course. And the interesting thing you point out is that is very similar to the story that I followed myself to become a developer. I started programming when I was probably 13 or 14. Computers weren't even really a thing, especially not where I was from. Internet was not a common thing either. I studied in school, I studied in college, I got a PhD. So I did follow all of the natural path, but all along I was already working on my own side projects. And this thing of working on your own side projects is one of the key aspects that we try to look for when we're trying to find these engineers or these future engineers, these juniors and these developers. Because what we've noticed is that a lot of brilliant people, they simply don't have the access to the resources to put them on what I would call the normal, the standard, the expected path. For instance, we've had engineers that actually came to interview with us. We do the interviews remotely, that did their coding interviews on their cell phone because they did not have access to a computer. And yet they managed to write code, which I already find extraordinary. Like, what are the chances of you actually trying to understand a problem that is fairly complex algorithm-wise while talking to an engineer in a language that is not your own and writing your code on the phone at the same time? It demonstrates a certain level of skill that is unusual. And this ability of these people to persevere without having the same resources makes them very capable of finding unusual solutions to problems. So what we're really looking for in the engineers that are not already following the normal path, because of course we hire a lot of junior engineers that did follow the normal path. They might have gone through a regular high school, started coding when they're in college, and then we hired them a few years into college or immediately after. Of course, we hire these engineers as well. But we also look for those that at the age of 16 tried making a little game. At the age of 17, wrote a little program that it was a crawler that did something that they needed just because they thought it was fun or interesting. And these are the people that might not even have the chance to follow all of the natural path that we also look for.
Okay, so you're saying that there are some self-educated personnel who is striving to grow, to learn this, and you're gonna just handpick them. Good. Paula, yeah, go ahead.
And Dimitri, the interesting part you also mentioned before is that even the people who follow the natural path struggle, and that is very true. Like, I've been programming for many years now, and sometimes I still find problems that I do struggle to solve, which is actually some of the more fun problems. Is when you're trying to really solve something, you get stuck on it, and you have to think about it, and you try to come up with solutions. And juniors get stuck even more often, and that's where this pairing with a senior engineer becomes very important. Because when you're part of a community of engineers that is basically an employee base of any engineering company, such as is the case here with Avantsoft, you have a lot of resources. If you get stuck in something, you can send a message in the Slack channel, and either another junior that has faced this similar problem before or one of the senior engineers will just say, have you tried doing this very specific thing here? And that will shortcut some of these little moments where you just spent 3 hours trying to solve something and you couldn't find the answer anywhere, not Stack Overflow, not in your imagination, and you can have the help of your peers. So this is the interesting thing also that happens when you're actually working with a company that has a lot of engineers. If you hire only one or two of these juniors and put them to work on a project, that is, I wouldn't say it's a bad idea, but it's likely that it won't work. We've actually done that experiment before because we had to experiment with different combinations to try to find just the Goldilocks zone. And we had a situation where we found two very, very capable engineers that were very junior. And we said, okay, let's do this experiment. Let's see if they can do this very simple project. And the outcome was not very positive. We had to have a senior step in to actually finish it. So it's all about this experimentation, trying to understand where each one is and giving them the support via this community of engineers that we actually can achieve good results.
But those juniors, they were supervised, right? I mean, they were not doing the work by themselves.
In the project that didn't work well, which was an experiment, because that's the thing we always talk about, correct? If you don't try, you never fail, correct? So in some cases, we do try extremes to experiment. So we had an idea for a project. It wasn't for a client, of course. And we said, okay, can we get these engineers to come up with something based on these specifications that are coming up here for something internal? And we experimented with it. We learned a lot from the process, but as expected, it didn't turn out the best results.
I think that's too big extreme, don't you think? I mean, putting two juniors on the project independently. Okay, so you're saying that you already tried multiple combinations and you somehow worked out the best combination that works for you and matches your, the goal of the company, bringing your community upper. By the way, kind of a little bit off topic, and it's related to our next section, but I think it's a good time to ask now. So in my experience, especially in the Eastern Europe, where economy is not that great, IT industry is so lucrative, so with such great opportunities that people with the old school, and emphasizing with the old school, simply don't believe that it is possible to be so lucrative with just regular job. I mean, not business, not banking, not financing, just regular job, regular guys doing some engineering work, and they're making 10, 15, 20 times higher than average salary. And some people, they just don't go in the industry again, not because they just don't believe that it can be so good, or maybe they don't believe that they can make so much money because they, I don't know, they just don't fit it. Did you see very similar, I don't know, view, maybe something like this in your country?
Yes, but I do have some interesting points here, correct? So let's start with why collaborators in engineering projects tend to have such high salaries. The reason, I think, is because of a matter of impact, of not even impact alone, but scale. When an engineer develops something, it can scale almost limitlessly. If you are a part of the development of a SaaS, you're maybe one of 5 core people that are developing a software that is going to be used by millions of people. The thing you're doing has an outsized impact given the amount of work that you put in. And the reason why you're able to have this impact is exactly because of all of this training that you have, of this brilliance that this kid who spent 15, 20 years developing his skills got to have, to translate real world requirements and needs and necessities of people and companies and put it in something that actually helps them. So
Okay.
because of this outsized impact, you tend to receive an outsized compensation. Of course, this is not something that is probably going to last forever. Like every type of job, you expect a certain cadence. You might have an increase over the years and then suddenly you have a decrease, whereas something else comes in later on. As for instance, nowadays there's this talk of no code, low code, and how that can impact software development. I don't actually think it impacts that much, but it is these types of tools and others in the future. Who knows? Someone might come up with an AI that you can just explain requirements and suddenly, poof, a software comes into existence 50 years, 100 years from now, however it may be. Like I can't really project the future. I don't think anyone can, but everything is possible, correct? Now, on this topic of some people not coming into the industry because they don't think they will make money forever, there are a few things here, correct? There is the seize the day approach. If you can make money now on this that is more than something else, do your risk assessment, see if it's something that you enjoy, and go for it. And on the other side, like anything that you do in life, you're much more likely to be good and succeed at it if you actually enjoy it. And if you enjoy it, you tend to do it even if you're not making that much money. And that's the thing that actually scares me a little bit about the IT industry or engineering and all of that nowadays, is that you have an immense amount of people going into this industry just because they hear that it's easy money, when in reality, it has its hardships like any other job has. There are difficulties. There are people who will not find jobs. There are those who can. There are those who will make more. There are those who will make less. So it is an industry like any other. Really choose the path that you want to follow based on more than just the possibility of making money.
Well, I mean, like it's any economical processes, it always goes in cycles. It goes, as you said, it goes up and then goes down. I slightly disagree with you about compensation because, for example, in the United States, IT salaries, they are average. They slightly higher than average salary. Well, unless you go to, I don't know, San Francisco, Manhattan, then yes, you will have some crazy numbers in hedge funds or in some financial institution. But that's more like an exception. On average, it's reasonable. When I started working in IT industry in 22 years ago, my first salary was, now I can tell, I think, it's not covered by NDA or anything like this. My salary was about $200 a month. And I was quite happy with the salary, by the way. It was great salary. It was sufficient for me to live well, I mean, not great life, but I mean, better than my parents' life, let me put it this way. But I think the sharp growth in demand for software engineering brought that even offshoring engineers, they became almost as expensive as engineering in the United States. And frankly, the difference is very marginal right now. And actually, now it's very hard to compete. If before you can say, well, I mean, I can sell you engineering for, well, 400 plus whatever margin I want to put on this engineering, let's say $600 a month, and you pay $6,000 a month to your local engineer. It was very clear choice. Of course, I will go with the offshoring. These days, no, you actually do need to provide actually the service, something that helps your client to do the job. And it's not just software development anymore. That's gone. It's more wide service. And your approach, I don't know, growing people, making sure that they know, growing under some supervision, mentoring, making sure that they deliver high level from the performance, from the quality, from many other aspect result that fits client expectation. That's something which is different, and not many companies in the United States can afford this kind of approach. So you definitely have a unique approach here.
And there's something interesting there that you pointed out, which is how in the IT industry, of course, there are likely other examples of this type of phenomena as well. But in the IT industry, since most developers now work remote, you have seen this equalization of salaries around the world. Of course, it hasn't quite equalized yet, even within the United States itself. If you go to California, the salary is one way. In Florida, it's another. In Brazil, it's another. In Mexico, it's another. Of course, there's still this variance. But you did see a little bit of a push up in the salary from these international locations. And a large part of it actually happened due to the pandemic because of the normalization of this remote type of work. And regarding that specifically, it's a very interesting scenario, correct? Because if you're living in a country where your cost of living is much lower and being paid by a company where the cost of living is higher in a way that is similar to the local employees, then yes, you do have this phenomena of this weird multiple of payment. Even though you receive the same, you actually are getting 2 or 3 times more. So that is, I don't actually have quite of an answer if that is going to last forever, but it's definitely something interesting to see. I know that some larger companies are starting to adjust salaries depending on the region you're in. So if you're in country X, they will adjust your salary based on the cost of living.
I mean, if they adjust, they're not adjusting it that significantly. I mean, most adjustments are coming actually again from Manhattan, from San Francisco, Los Angeles area. So if people living those very expensive areas, they would adjust. I mean, a company would adjust salary to some United States location. So it's still very good salary. I mean, they will not adjust you to some, I don't know, average salary in Eastern Europe, for example. No, it will be just regular salary, normal salary for United States employee. And you actually, yes, you touched very good topic about remote work. Well, luckily for us, I mean, you and your company, my company, now when we talk to clients, we don't have to sell the idea that working remotely is bad.
That's
Because
true.
they already work remotely. So this topic not even discussed during the conversation. This is done deal. So pandemic, I mean, how bad it was, yes, it was pretty bad, but it literally removed those separation between offshoring and onshoring development, because there is no difference. And big companies are trying to bring people. They actually put very strict rules right now, 3 times per week to be in office. But people, well, okay, 3 times. If it's 3, then it's 2, right? I mean, if it's a 2, then it's 1. It's still very flexible, and big companies still struggling with bringing people to the offices, and it's literally more like people. It's viewed more as an exception than as a rule. People do like to work from home, especially, like, again, going back to Manhattan and San Francisco, spending 2 hours to office and 2 hours from office. And working from home, 8 hours, 4 hours per day wasting. No, I will do everything possible to stay home today. Everything. I mean, I will work extra 2 hours just to stay from home. It's already going to be beneficial. So I'm not sure if it's going to be back. I'm not sure if people going to go back to offices. I mean, they tasted this freedom, and it's very hard to take freedom. Extremely hard. People will be, I don't know, compromising their income, their salary, but
That is
they
true.
will be working from homes. Way too comfortable. Again, people tried it, and now people know what it is.
And
Okay.
a tricky thing as well with this hybrid work is that
Yeah.
it's not very useful for you to have just a rule: come into the office twice a week. Because
Yeah.
unless everyone is coming in the same days, you're not getting the true benefits from having people in the office. Because what are the benefits of having people in the office? Is to have this human element in your company where people are exchanging ideas, they're talking, they're befriending their coworkers, and it's humanizing both the company and your products. If you just have people popping into the office just to pop into the office, maybe to deliver a stakeholder meeting and leave, you're not getting any of those benefits, but you are getting all of the inconveniences of having
Yep.
to, one, keep an office and to go in. So I actually struggle a little bit to trying to find out where the correct balance for this lies. Maybe it is for companies just to have almost like co-working spaces or these cool spaces where people can go to work if they want. And maybe it's some hybrid approach where companies have a bunch of these all spread like WeWork tried to do, and close to your house you have one. So you kind of collaborate with other engineers, but they're not even from your same company. And they just, I'm not entirely sure. It's just spitting out ideas, but it will be interesting to see how things evolve.
Well, they actually do come up with some creative ways to synchronize people. They establish like free lunch day, like Wednesday is a free lunch for the entire company. People, okay, well, I mean, it's not that great, but kind of if you're on the edge, going, not going, lunch might, well, I mean, for some people,
Yep,
might
a
convince you.
push.
Yes, some mandatory days, it's like once a month, I don't know, some second Friday, it's a mandatory, everybody must be in office for something. So they are trying
Mhm.
to come up, and I think they will, maybe it will be, if it's a 3 days per week, it's going to be Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And then Tuesday and Thursday you can work from home. So don't know. I mean, frankly, we don't have such problem. I don't even want to solve this problem. I think big guys will be solving it themselves, and we'll just follow them and see how they will convince people to change their
Mhm.
habits. It will, again, very, very interesting to see.
That is true.
Yeah. Um, Now, you said that you have multicultural experience, and you actually have specific, I don't know, views, opinions about different countries, how people do work in different countries, how they some special skills, some special habits. So, can you share with us some of your experience, some of your views?
Yeah, of course. I've lived in actually I've lived in Switzerland, I've lived in England, I'm from Brazil, I lived in Brazil, I've lived in the United States. So I've moved a lot between different countries, worked in different countries, studied in different countries. And it's very beautiful to see how different cultures, different countries, they evolve to see work in different ways. So
Okay.
you have, for instance, the American, the United States mentality of you live to work, you will build your own thing, and you will achieve greatness. You have this culture in the U.S. which comes from the very foundation of the country. You have the style in Brazil, for instance, which is to you work to live, you don't live to work. So in Brazil, people really try to enjoy their lives, they try to just work as little as they can and just meet the requirements. You have the Europe, for instance, which is a a collection of countries that has existed for millennia, a culture that has evolved tremendously over many years. And there you have it. Of course, it varies by country and country, but some of the countries I've been to there, for instance, they have a very good balance between work and life, where they actually know where the boundaries are. They actually know when to stop, when to start enjoying. Even in companies, you see that they usually stop at a specific hour. They all go out together. They hang out. So it is very interesting to see how this changes between countries, and that affects a lot of things in the way that you need to deal with these offshore collaborators when you're including them in your team. Because if you're including someone from a place where they work from 8 to noon, then they take a siesta where they take a 2-hour break and then they work again. You need to take that into account. You shouldn't be scheduling meetings during their siesta, for instance. Of course, it's a silly detail, correct? But a lot of different things come into play when you're working with all of these countries. And if you really want to have a successful multicultural team that spans multiple regions, you need to take all of these things into account. And this takes a lot of learning and being exposed to it and working with these different places for a long time, which is why when we were discussing what we are trying to do, we always try to pair these more senior engineers with locations where they have some experience with. If they speak the language, that's a huge plus, because sometimes the brilliant people might struggle to explain what they're thinking in a language that is not their own. You might have like an incredible Mexican programmer who has a lot of trouble talking to you in Spanish or in English, and because of that, you don't give as much value to their opinion, when in reality they might have some brilliant things to say. So it's important to take a lot of these different aspects into account when working with different people, being open to knowing other languages, being open to understanding their cultures, and adapting and working around things.
Okay. Makes sense. That actually reminds me of Mediterranean style of work as well. I have the story. One of my project managers, he moved from Eastern Europe to Spain, and temporarily he lives with his in-laws. And he said, "Well, Dmitry, I'm not gonna work until 7 p.m. for the next month or so until I live with my in-laws, because they will not understand why the reason why I work after 6. They will just create a big problem. They will be talking to me. They will be teaching. I just don't want to touch this problem. Once I move to my own apartment, I will do whatever times you need me to be." So that's I think that's it. And that's actually what you just said. It's not fighting, it's not changing, it's actually understanding, it's working around those habits, and it's saying it is normal. The fact that you don't like it and they don't accept it, it doesn't really matter.
Exactly.
You have your own culture, they have their own culture. Learn how to work together. That's it. Don't change each other. It just won't work.
Exactly. And that actually goes to a thing that we really try to do here in the company, which is to give people control over their own time. As in, don't try to just buy all of your employees' time. Give back control over their time. Like, if they are accomplishing what you need them to accomplish, do not create constraints for them just to be there and be present. It's very important, at least in my opinion, to be very results driven. As in, you have tasks to do, you have results. Let's achieve excellence in what we do, but there is no reason to be pushing different people to behave the same way as everyone else. Really try to understand how each one excels. For instance, we have engineers from the same location. Some like to wake up incredibly early, and you see their Slack messages starting to pop in at 4:30 in the morning, which I'm still asleep then. And you have other engineers that like to work late at night. They might go to sleep at 4 in the morning. So there is no reason why we should say, okay, we all work from 9 to 5. Give them the freedom and understand how to make that possible, because you still need to have collaboration. For instance, it is important, or at least it is a style of management, to have stand-up meetings. So place your stand-up meetings in a time that makes the most sense. Maybe it's the end of the day for one and the start of the day for another. But there needs to be this combination of being able to collaborate by sharing some amount of time, while keeping each one, giving them the freedom that they deserve.
But I mean, you don't talk the entire day in IT industry. You do need to code sometimes, and actually most of the time, right? Technically, yes, you have other activities, discussing, preparing, code reviewing, and all other activities. But after all, it's sitting on your computer on your own and coding. And you better do it when your brain is working properly, not when you have to do it because it's 9 a.m. or whatever time it is. Yep, true. Well, good, because I mean, from our side, some companies, they do install like screen sharing, screen tracking system, activity tracking system, which actually track activity on the system. I mean, from the beginning, for example, we decided, no, I mean, if I don't trust the developer, why do I have him on my payroll in the first place? So I mean, if he screwed up, Well, I mean, we will see what we can fix. I mean, if he screwed up 3, 4, 5 times, then I guess I made a bad call. But fortunately, I mean, it didn't happen too many times in my experience. So that's good. Good that you do trust your people and you do give them freedom. I mean, in our industry, it's actually very, very good stuff. But you didn't mention about special approaches to work in Switzerland and in England. Do you
So
have something?
I'm sure there are some interesting nuances, correct?
Yeah.
For instance, if you're working in a country such as Switzerland, correct? Switzerland is an extraordinary country. You're talking about a country that has been around for millennia, remained neutral in most conflicts.
Yeah.
It's almost its own bubble and isolated community surrounded by mountains. We have water produced from multiple alternative sources. It's a very incredible infrastructure. And this infrastructure has been around for a long time. So when people are working there, they're working a little bit different than when you're working somewhere like Brazil, for instance. In Brazil, you're working to build things. You don't really have much that already works. Everything is kind of chaotic and you're trying to organize things. Let's build, okay, things like organize, build. When you're working in Switzerland, you're working to maintain. You're working to make slow, sustainable progress that will affect the country probably many years from now and not today. So when you're working with these two different cultures, for instance, you need to understand this difference. If you're working in this in Switzerland, for instance, you need to understand that there will be definite times to work. For instance, like you mentioned with your friend, you will work from X hours to to Y hours. If you're working in a country where things are a little bit more messy, you might work from X to Y, then from X1 to Y1, then from X2 to Y2, and you have breaks and you have this and that. So there are these differences in how you actually work between these two countries. And it all stems, I believe, from the difference in the developmental stage that this country is just because of the amount of time that that culture and country has been around.
Well, I think it's more German order, which
Of
does
course.
affect Switzerland, because I witness the same in Netherlands. When you drive around the country, when you visit places in Netherlands, it's literally you have a feeling that when they do something built, I don't know, doesn't matter which industry actually, roads, houses, software development, they just sit down, then think it through. Next day they start building, but they're building it from the first time properly, and it's built for many, many years ahead. They don't even need to maintain it because that's how well it's done. That's overall feelings about Netherlands. So I think Switzerland is somewhat around the same approach.
Oh, this that you mentioned is also a very interesting phenomena. The level of QA required might actually vary by region.
Oh,
And that is not necessarily a bad thing because often there is a difference between the speed of work and the amount of QA it requires. And this ratio of how fast you want to develop, how much QA you want, how many bugs are tolerable, is dependent on the type of industry you're on. Because if you're a very small startup where you need to push a feature every day because you're in the build, measure, learn cycle, you need to measure the results of something that you thought of this morning tomorrow, you need to be pushing code fast. And it's okay if when you push this new code, you break some unrelated feature that you're planning to offset or to sunset anyways. Whereas if you're working on the software for a bank, you better not introduce any bugs. It's not acceptable for there to be bugs in that type of software. Of course, it's not impossible for bugs to make it through, but
that's
it
that's
changes.
budget that's budget related as well. I mean, we have multiple requests. Like, why do we need QA? Developers will test themselves. Why do we even wasting money on this? It's actually sometimes very hard to explain. Well, I mean, it's easy to explain because we think it's obvious, but it just sometimes doesn't get through this wall of not understanding. So it's very hard to convince actually and to do at least minimum work because it's just required. I mean, well, from our experience, it just doesn't work any other way. And yes, it does depends on it depends on the industry. For example, in medical industry, what I had experience, in most cases, a ratio between developers and QA is 1 to 1. And sometimes QA team is actually bigger than development team, and actually developers do participate in testing with specific requirements such as you cannot test features you were developing. So it's a more cross development. Well, it's okay in the United States actually to change roles. Developers actually don't mind to become testers for some period of time. It's not actually like we have problem in Eastern Europe. It's like if you're a developer, then you're a developer. It's almost like elite. You don't touch testing. It's below my I don't know, my grade, my position. So is there such actually, by the way, vision in your company, or do you actually people easy change role between roles?
So I think that point that you brought is very, very interesting, correct? For some reason, we think that the people who test the code are somehow in a lower scale than those who are developing the code, when in reality, they're both very specific skills that require a long time to master in every case. It's not because you're a very good developer that you're a very good QA. There are some people that are extraordinary at QA. They can look at a piece of code, understand the requirements that were in the code somehow from just the nuances of what it's doing, know what to test for, and find bugs on it that even that person who developed in the first place couldn't even have fathomed about. So it's I don't think that that there should be any difference between QAs and developers. I think that the reason why we see this almost stigma towards QA is probably because historically a lot of companies have been putting their developers that don't perform to the same level to work in QA, because QA usually has a lower budget. So the developers that don't make it through and get promoted to higher levels of development, they tend to just get stuck in QA. And that might have created a negative stigma around it. But exactly because the reason you said that it's hard to explain to stakeholders why we're spending as much money testing features as implementing them in the first place. So
just implement it properly, right? I mean, why do we need to test them? I know, we've been there. Okay. So Paula, I think we're slightly running out of time. Not a big deal, but I think this conversation was very interesting. We touched many points, sometimes actually points we shouldn't have touched. It will be questioned more likely on YouTube, but it's okay. Actually, like you said, I do like to poke around and make people kind of jump and think. That is essential part of the growing, personally, professionally. So be it. Thank you very much for your participation. Thank you very much for sharing your experience and your knowledge. And I hope we will meet later and talk more. Okay.
It was a pleasure talking with you, Dimitri. Till next time.
Bye.